Jen, can you tell me a little bit about your background and what have you done in the past and what are you currently doing
Sure,
in as a clinician?
sure. Yeah. Well, I um, had graduated from University of Pittsburgh with a PhD in clinical health psychology. So it was like
Okay.
for treating mental health issues within a health population. So I did an internship and worked at the VA for a while, and that was where I did a lot of my clinical work. And we would work with veterans who had obviously like PTSD is a big thing that we would work with, but also a lot of the folks I saw had also chronic illness, um, even hospice and palliative care for a while, and then
Okay.
chronic pain. So I would have individual clients, but also we would do groups. And then I also did some time in a substance use dependence unit, and
Okay.
we would have groups and individuals there.
What did at the VA, what did a typical day look like?
Um, well, depending on which clinic I was in, I might have like a several individual patients, like maybe brief sessions, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes they were hour-long sessions. And then maybe in the afternoon, it would have um, a couple of groups or a treatment team meeting.
Okay. We talked a little bit about interdisciplinary counseling in one of the
Mhm.
classes. And how does that work for you in the VA?
Well, with the chronic pain patients, we would have a weekly meeting that had PT, OT,
Okay.
social work, psychology. There would be chiropractor, and then
Wow.
a physician and a nurse. So it would be med management, all the different disciplines. And we would meet together, but then we would bring a veteran in who wanted treatment, and we would talk about what they were looking for. So there was a lot of collaboration there. And then on the substance use floor, we typically didn't have the patient in the room with us most of the time. But the different teams, it would be like the addiction counselor, the psychiatrist, physician, nurse, and the psychologist would talk about best steps forward or what the person was struggling with. If there was like the substance use plus depression or trauma or other things, we would figure out the treatment plan that way.
I'm just curious, like in that role, what is your like what do you contribute as
And with the team,
a clinical, yeah, with the team?
yeah. So, well, typically, so if somebody's coming in for substance use disorder, they have a history of trauma or, depression or anxiety or PTSD or something like that. So we would be figuring out, do they need additional treatment besides, like, depending where they were through detox at that point, but do they just need, you know, to be developing like better behavioral strategies to manage like coping with stress so that they don't use again. But that's always harder if you have like other things, mental health issues underlying it. And a lot of the veterans do have that. So we might do like trauma processing with them, or
Okay.
if it was a longer term thing, they might need to be referred to a different clinic.
What?
So, and then sometimes we would do assessments, like if they're cognitive issues, like
Okay.
memory issues or dementia, things like that, there would be, for like an intake from a psychology perspective, we would go through like a life history, obviously like your current supports, but then we would go through like a DSM diagnostic interview as well as a cognitive screening. Um, they call it the MOCA. That's the one we would use just to see, if somebody's having any difficulty with memory.
I'm so used to giving my own personal views as a theater person, and it has to be just facts.
Yeah.
Like they're walking
Right.
around the room, and I would say things like, "I feel like they're walking around the room because they're agitated," and they and Holly kept saying, "Just the facts."
Yeah.
So
What are you
what are you
actually
seeing?
behaviorally observing? Like they are walking around the room.
Yeah, that's going to be something that I'm always trying to add a story to it. Always.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
good way to put it. Yeah.
So I need to change that. I think, and that'll be some challenges. All right, cool. Thank you. One of the another question is what kind of, I don't know this, I'll just read it because it doesn't makes more sense to you. What kinds of records about clients slash students does a counselor keep? And how do you, I think they're wondering it's confidential. That's probably, I'm guessing the ethics are thrown in here. Where does the counselor store these records? Paper filing systems, electronic filing. So I know that's a huge thing that we're learning right now, the ethical
Yeah.
code and how there's
Right. Well, within the hospital, like if you work in the health system, they typically have Epic or some other kind of like medical charting system that's already vetted to be secure.
okay.
But if you're in a hospital system, at least these days now, therapists or psychologists records are visible to other providers. So if like a
Hmm.
physician saw that person yesterday and you saw them today, you could look at their note, they could look at yours. Back in the day, they used to make the therapy notes uh like secure where you had to get special permission to look at people's therapy notes in the medical chart, but now I think they're considering it more like part of care.
Okay.
So
And
people
that's,
can do that.
would
But if
that be
you're in
like,
private practice, like
oh, the-
then you just store your records. It's just you basically. Like you're the only one that sees them, and they could be paper, or you can pay for electronic um, charting systems. But it's really just you seeing them, unless somebody wants to give written permission for you to release them to somebody else.
yeah, that's interesting. It's not one of the questions, but I'm kind of curious about it. You're looking at private, because I think you've done it all. You're
Yeah,
now education, you've done private practice, you've done collaborative work.
group practice, and everybody's kind of essentially under the same roof and has different offices. You might have nothing to do with each other than you're paying rent for the office and they're giving you, and you're just all supporting each other. Like if you're at the hospital system or something more integrated, like those patients come through the system itself, like the referrals come from the top down. But if you're in a group practice or a private practice, like the client, they find your number somewhere online and they call you and they initiate that.
And my guess is that you probably need to do group practice, hospital work before you even create your own private practice.
I
You would
feel
need,
like yes, that's a really good point because I mean, some people will just be done with school and think, oh, I'll just start a private practice. But if you have very little experience, you
yeah.
really are in trouble, I think. Like, whereas I was not ready, I would not have been ready to do this without having practiced some with more support, because a lot of weird things come up and you want to learn how to cope with them. And then you feel more confident to handle it.
Yeah.
More independently.
The termination process, which I always think is such a like, I don't know why I think that word is harsh,
I
but
don't like that word.
yeah, I
Yeah,
was
I
like,
don't
why do they
really use
call it
it.
that? Is there another, what word do you use? Like, it's like ending
I
sentence.
just, yeah, ending in an episode of care, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, termination is so, yeah, it's like
Yeah. I'm just
so
like,
negative.
I know. Every time I read that, I'm like, that just sounds, and I always have to think, I'm like, oh, okay. They want ending it. Is
Yeah.
there, have you ever had the experience where you decided to do ending episode or care episodic, whatever I think that's what you said, and the patient decides they're not ready, and how do you handle that?
I usually start by reducing frequency of sessions and then they
Okay,
feel
gotcha.
more independent, there've been a couple times where I typically, if somebody's feeling better and they're getting something out of it and you're encouraging less and less frequency, they're usually on board because people don't want to spend more time usually than they have to coming in and paying for it. If they do, then that's telling me that they're just like, they're not really integrating it into their day-to-day life,
Yeah.
where they could be more just have a higher quality of life and maybe check in more often or check in once in a while with you, but not need like these weekly sessions forever. Like that's not the goal. One person, she really needed more trauma processing and it was more complex than I could do because she had a lot of other things happening. So I was trying to refer her on and she was not happy about that, but eventually it worked out. But that was really tricky because it wasn't personal. I just couldn't do what I thought she needed. And she felt like that was really an uncomfortable thing for her to do. But she ended up eventually accepting the new referral and starting with them. And then I was able to meet with her, and she said, yeah, I think it is a better fit. So that was a good, but that's like, that could take a long time and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's interesting because that adds a whole nother issue of
Yeah.
dependency on
Yes.
the
Right. Which you don't
on
want
the
to
clinician.
foster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Insurance payment is linked to the diagnosis, which was
Mm.
never supposed to be how it goes, but that is how they have done it, which is not
Yeah,
good.
that was the main thing too with insurance. You're kind of like you have to give it. I mean, the insurance companies will make the choice, and sometimes you have to change probably your treatment so they cover it.
Right. Which is not really fully supported or ethical to do that, but it's also like, well, how do you be practical and still be ethical? There's a zone where I think a lot of people ride this line of trying to please both sides of it, which is a problem in the way that in the US the insurance system is set up.
Yeah. The question is, in the counselor's current setting or your past setting, which of the following problems are the greatest concern?
I would say when I was at the VA,
Yeah.
I think the big, I think anger management was probably a big one that was stressful for a
Yeah.
lot of people there. A lot of, because, you know, when you have a lot of trauma on top of people that are trained to be, in battle and trained with weapons, like their go-to oftentimes is get angry, or to be more aggressive. So that
Mhm.
was something that's like a different environment than a lot of other environments.
In what ways does the counselor promote the counseling program to the community, faculty, administration? I guess your program, maybe we could talk about Xavier a little bit.
Yeah.
You do a lot of promoting of
Well,
the,
actually, I do. So in Xavier now, like I have a role where I am a clinical supervisor for some counseling or some psychology students that are going to get their doctoral degrees. So I supervise them. They actually do provide treatment to students here, to college students. And I do promote the service to make sure that we get, people know we're here for them, and that if they need therapy or counseling, that they.
is your program, it's just funded by the university, right?
Yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
current one.
And have you ever had to seek funding for any of your projects?
Uh, not not from a clinical standpoint. I mean, I've sought funding for research, but that's a different story. I took a tour of a substance use facility yesterday, and they're funded by, they just charge people's insurance, whoever is coming
Oh,
in. Yeah.
okay. So that works. Okay.
Mhm.
That's nice. And last but not least, could you give someone like me advice on continuing a career, continuing this path?
Could focus on a population that you're, like a niche, like what
Mhm.
you're, I think, I don't know, you went into it with maybe some ideas of who your
Yeah.
clientele would be, and I don't know if that's still the case, but
Yeah.
you know,
It's
um,
interesting. We had to write about that. And I did write a little bit about, vocal working with like performers and the fear of going on stage or the fear of presenting.
yeah.
And I also started looking into LGBTQ plus youth
Oh
and
yeah, that's a good
what
idea.
what things are being taken away. And they have Glisten, of course, you have the Trevor Project, you have a lot of really interesting. So I wrote an entire paper on that, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my two pieces of advice are that, and then just never stop consulting with other people. Like, it can be, if you get really busy, it can be tempting to kind of just go into your own head and forget to get peer supervision or other people's consultation. And that's always better to have
Yeah.
other people to consult with, like throughout your whole career, no matter how much experience you have, because you can't ever know everything.
Yeah. 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 Definitely rely on others. I think that's
Yeah.
good. And I think as an educator and a collaborator, I think that is something that I'm used to doing.
Yeah.
And so But you're right. It is easy to just kind of like, it's easier just to like try to figure it out yourself. But then we don't have all the answers. I mean, just starting this, oh my God, there's so much to know.
I know. Yeah.
And I just hope I'm nervous. I'm like, I hope I can do this. So, sorry, I have to, I have to pay my parking again.
Right.
But Jen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.